What happens when the most feared warriors in 6 different galactic empires meet their match in a single human bartender? In the darkest corner of the galaxy, where even pirates fear to tread, stands the Nexus Station, a lawless trading post where the strongest survive and the weak become footnotes. Here, violence is currency, and respect is earned through bloodshed. But when Captain Marcus Chun, a seemingly ordinary human, takes over the station's abandoned cantina, he doesn't realize he's about to face the ultimate test of human ingenuity, determination, and that peculiar brand of stubborn defiance that has carried humanity from cave-dwelling hunters to star-spanning explorers. Six aliens champions. 6 different species. 6 undefeated warriors who have never met their equal. They're about to discover why humans don't just survive in a hostile universe. They thrive in it. This is the story of how one human's refusal to back down changed the balance of power in the Outer Rim, and why the phrase, "never pick a fight with a human," became the most repeated warning in 6 different languages across the galaxy. The cargo hauler Lucky Strike shuddered as it docked with Nexus Station, its hull scarred from micrometeorite impacts and pirate encounters. Captain Marcus Chun powered down the engines and checked his credit balance one more time, wincing at the pathetic number that stared back at him. 1,200 credits. Barely enough to refuel, let alone pay for the station docking fees and the meal he desperately needed. Marcus had been running freight between the Outer Rim colonies for 3 years, ever since the Galactic Trade Consortium had blacklisted him for refusing to haul slave cargo from the Draxian Empire. His principles had cost him everything: his company contract, his crew, and eventually his ship's mortgage. Now he was down his last few runs before the bank would repossess the Lucky Strike. The airlock hissed open, and Marcus stepped into the chaos of Nexus Station. The place was exactly as advertised, a lawless trading post where the worst of 6 different species came to conduct business away from government oversight. The main corridor reeked of alien pheromones, cooking fuel, and something that might have been rotting fish. Holographic advertisements in a dozen languages promised everything from military-grade weapons to exotic narcotics. Marcus navigated through the crowd, noting how other beings gave him a wide berth. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most aliens saw them as primitive curiosities, smart enough to be useful, but too weak to be threatening. Marcus had learned to use this assumption to his advantage in his freight business, though it hadn't saved him from financial ruin. He found what he was looking for 3 levels down: a small cantina with a for lease sign hanging crookedly above the door. The previous owner, according to the scrawled note, had been eaten by customers during a disagreement over watered-down drinks. Marcus peered through the grimy windows and saw overturned tables, a partially destroyed bar, and what looked like scorch marks from energy weapons. Perfect. Marcus had exactly enough credits to cover the first month's lease and basic renovations. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was better than returning to Earth as a failure. He'd grown up in the slums of New Detroit, where learning to fight and think quickly meant the difference between eating and starving. Those skills had served him well in space, and they'd serve him here too. The Nexus Station administrator was a Keth, a lizard-like species known for their bureaucratic efficiency and complete lack of empathy. The creature's forked tongue flicked out constantly as it spoke, tasting the air for chemical traces of lies or fear. "You understand the terms, human," the Keth hissed, its yellow eyes fixed on Marcus. "Payment due on the first day of each cycle. No exceptions. Security deposits are non-refundable. Violence against customers results in immediate termination of lease and forfeiture of all assets." Marcus signed the digital contract with a steady hand, ignoring the Keth's obvious expectation that he'd fail within weeks. "One question. Who are the previous owners I should know about?" The Keth's tongue flicked more rapidly. 3 Xeronian warriors leased before the human who was eaten. They lasted 2 cycles before they were killed by the Thackeray Battlemaster Vexcore. Before them, a Deltan crime syndicate operated for 1 cycle before the Hegemony Enforcer Cartax shut them down permanently. Permanently? Their remains were used to decorate the walls. Very artistic arrangement. Marcus nodded, as if this was normal business information. And the current problem tenants? The Keth consulted its data pad, its claws clicking against the surface. 6 individuals maintain unofficial territorial claims in the Cantina district. Vexcor the Thackeray, KR Tax of the Hegemony, Nala, 7, a synthetic intelligence combat unit. The Void Walker, known as Sten, Brother Kazad of the Gorlan War Clans, and the entity called Shadow of Teeth. Marcus recognized some of those names from news reports and freight manifest warnings. These weren't just tough customers, they were legends. Each one represented their species' pinnacle of combat evolution, individuals who had earned their reputations through countless victories against impossible odds. They don't get along? Marcus asked. They maintain an uneasy truce based on mutual respect for each other's capabilities. No single one is clearly superior to the others, so direct confrontation has been avoided. However, they have all sworn that any being who attempts to establish permanent residence in their domain will face individual challenges from each of them. Challenges? Combat to the death. Marcus absorbed this information while calculating his options. Running would mean returning to Earth broke and defeated. Staying meant almost certain death against opponents who had never been beaten. But there was a third option, one that these aliens probably hadn't considered. I'll take the lease, Marcus said. The Keth's eyes widened slightly. You understand that the previous human lasted only 4 days before Vexcor tore him apart for serving diluted Thackeray blood wine. I understand perfectly. Marcus spent his first day cleaning the cantina and taking inventory. The previous owners had left behind a surprising amount of serviceable equipment, probably because carrying furniture wasn't practical when fleeing for one's life. The bar itself was solid neutronium-reinforced titanium, built to withstand heavy weapons fire. The tables and chairs were military surplus, designed for species that could accidentally crush normal furniture. More importantly, Marcus found an intact kitchen and a supply room that connected to the station's main storage network. With some creativity, he could source ingredients for almost any species' dietary requirements. His plan was ambitious, possibly suicidal, but it was the only chance he had. On the second day, Marcus opened for business. The cantina was clean, well-lit, and offered a menu that catered to 12 different species' nutritional needs. Marcus had spent his last few credits on premium ingredients and had researched each species' cultural preferences for food preparation and service. The prices were reasonable, the portions generous, and the atmosphere was designed to be welcoming rather than threatening. He served exactly 3 customers that day, a nervous Deltan trader, a young Hegemony scout, and a Keth maintenance worker. All of them looked over their shoulders constantly and left large tips, clearly expecting the cantina to be a smoking ruin by the following morning. On the third day, the first challenger arrived. Vexcor was everything Marcus had expected from a Thackeray battlemaster, and more. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with gray-green skin that looked like natural armor plating, and for arms that ended in claws capable of rending metal. Thackeray were descended from apex predators on a heavy-gravity world where everything had evolved to kill everything else. They had joined galactic civilization by conquering 3 neighboring star systems and demanding admission to the Galactic Council as equals. The creature entered the cantina during the lunch rush. All 6 customers froze as the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vexcor's quad-eyed gaze swept the room before focusing on Marcus behind the bar. Human, the Thackeray rumbled in heavily accented galactic standard. I am Vexcor, 9th Circle Battlemaster of the Thackeray Empire, Slayer of the Hegemony Fleet Admiral Krillvash, Breaker of the Deltan Defense Line. You have claimed territory that belongs to warriors. This cannot be permitted. Marcus continued polishing a glass, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. I'm Marcus Chun, bartender and short-order cook. I serve food and drinks to anyone who can pay for them. You're welcome to order something, or you can leave. Your choice. Vexcor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of surprise among his species. You do not understand, human. I'm offering you the honor of single combat. If you win, you may remain. When you lose, your death will be quick and honorable. I understand perfectly, Marcus said, setting down the glass. You're a customer making threats against my business. I'm telling you to order something or leave. The Thackeray's claws extended, each one gleaming like polished steel. You refuse the challenge. I'm refusing to participate in your delusion that you own this place. Marcus gestured around the cantina. I pay rent here. I have a legal lease. You want to fight someone? Go find an arena. Vexcor's head tilted in confusion. In Thackeray culture, a challenge could only be refused by admitting cowardice and accepting permanent exile. The human's response didn't fit any category the warrior understood. You mock the traditions of warriors, Vexcor snarled. I'm serving lunch, Marcus replied. The special today is Thackeray blood soup with imported Terran spices. 12 credits, and I guarantee it's better than anything you've had outside your homeworld. For a long moment, the two stared at each other across the bar. The other customers had quietly relocated to tables near the emergency exits, ready to run when the violence started. But instead of attacking, Vexcor's nostrils flared as he caught the scent of properly prepared blood soup. You know Thackeray cuisine? The warrior asked, his aggressive posture softening slightly. I know 12 different species cuisines, Marcus said. Cooking is like fighting. You succeed by understanding your opponent and adapting your strategy. Vexcor considered this. Serve me this soup. If it is adequate, I will consider postponing your death until after I have eaten. Marcus ladled the soup into a bowl sized for Thackeray consumption, adding a garnish that mimicked traditional homeworld presentation. He'd studied Thackeray culture extensively during his freight runs to their colonies, learning that their entire society was built around concepts of honor, strength, and worthiness. But he'd also learned that they respected skill and craftsmanship, viewing mastery of any discipline as a form of strength. Vexcor lifted the bowl with 2 hands and drank deeply. His eyes widened, and he made a sound that might have been pleasure or surprise. This is exceptional, the Thackeray admitted. Where did you learn to prepare our traditional foods? I spent time on Thackeray colony worlds, Marcus said. Your people have a saying, know your enemy as you know yourself. I figured that worked both ways. You quote the 7th maxim of war, Vexcor said, a note of respect entering his voice. Few off-worlders know our teachings. Few off-worlders take the time to learn, Marcus replied. Most aliens see humans as primitive and weak. Most humans see aliens as incomprehensible and threatening. Both sides miss opportunities to understand each other. Vexcor finished the soup and placed the bowl on the bar with careful precision. Human Marcus Chun, your skill in the culinary arts is worthy of respect. However, this does not resolve the matter of territorial claims. The other champions will still come for you. Let them come, Marcus said. I'll serve them the best meals they've ever had and charge them fair prices. If they want to fight about it afterward, that's their choice. You are either very brave or very foolish. Marcus smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. My grandmother always said those were the same thing. Vexcor stood and placed 20 credits on the bar, more than the soup cost, but not quite enough to be insulting. I will return tomorrow, human. Your death is merely postponed. After the Thackeray left, the other customers slowly returned to their meals. Marcus noticed that several new patrons had arrived, drawn by curiosity about the human who had faced down a legendary warrior and lived. Word was spreading through the station that something interesting was happening in the old cantina. Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing for the challenges he knew were coming. Each of the 6 champions represented not just individual threats, but entire species approaches to conflict and dominance. Defeating them, or even surviving their challenges, would require more than human stubbornness. It would require the one advantage humans had developed during their short but violent history, adaptability. As he closed the cantina that evening, Marcus reflected on his situation. He was a failed freight captain with barely enough credits to last a week, facing off against the most dangerous beings in 6-star systems. By any rational measure, he should be booking passage back to Earth and admitting defeat. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Marcus intended to meet them the same way humanity had always met impossible odds, with creativity, determination, and an absolute refusal to give up. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of, but they were about to learn something new. They were about to discover why humans didn't just survive in a hostile universe. They made it better. The fourth day began with Marcus discovering that someone had spray-painted "Dead Human Walking" across his cantina's front windows in 3 different languages. He cleaned it off while preparing for the morning rush, noting with satisfaction that the breakfast crowd had grown to include off-duty station security officers and even a few merchants from the upper levels. Word was spreading that the human's food was exceptional and his prices fair, a rare combination on Nexus Station. More importantly, word was spreading that he had faced VexCorp and lived to serve soup another day. In the brutal social hierarchy of the station, survival against impossible odds carried weight. Marcus had spent the previous evening researching his likely next challenger. KR Tax of the hegemony was everything VexCorp was not. Methodical where the Thackeray was passionate, calculating where the warrior was direct. The hegemony species had evolved from pack hunters on a desert world, developing complex social structures based on hierarchy and precise role distribution. They had built the largest single empire in known space through careful planning and overwhelming force. KR Tax himself was a legend among enforcers, the hegemony's elite police force responsible for maintaining order across thousands of worlds. He had personally ended 17 separate rebellions, usually by identifying and eliminating key leadership figures with surgical precision. Unlike VexCorp, who was driven by honor and tradition, KR Tax was motivated by duty and efficiency. The challenger arrived precisely at midday, just as Marcus had expected. Hegemony agents were creatures of habit, preferring to operate during peak activity periods when their actions would have maximum psychological impact. KR Tax entered the cantina flanked by 2 junior enforcers, his gray uniform immaculate despite the station's chaotic environment. The hegemony agent was tall and lean, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that missed nothing. His movements were economical and precise, each gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. Human designation Marcus Chun, KR Tax announced, consulting a data pad. You have established an unauthorized commercial enterprise within a contested territorial zone. Standard procedure requires immediate cessation of activities and voluntary departure from the station. Unlike VexCorp's direct challenge to combat, this felt more like an arrest warrant. Marcus continued serving lunch to his customers, noting that several had quietly moved toward the exits. Hegemony enforcers were known for their efficiency in eliminating problems, and collateral damage was considered an acceptable cost. I have a legal lease and all required permits, Marcus replied without looking up from the grill. My business is properly registered with Station Administration. Station Administration lacks jurisdiction in matters of territorial security, KR Tax said. The hegemony recognizes no authority other than demonstrated strength and proper hierarchy. You have demonstrated neither. One of the junior enforcers stepped forward, hand moving toward his sidearm. Shall we process the human for immediate termination, senior agent? KR Tax held up a restraining hand. Standard procedure must be followed. The human will be given opportunity to demonstrate worthiness through approved combat protocols. Marcus finally looked up, meeting the agent's gaze. What if I told you I don't recognize the hegemony's authority either? The junior enforcers tensed, clearly expecting their superior to order immediate violence. Instead, KR Tax tilted his head in what might have been curiosity. Elaborate your position, human. You claim territorial rights based on strength, Marcus said, wiping his hands on a towel. But you've never actually fought for this territory. You inherited your reputation from other hegemony agents who conquered other worlds. That's not strength, that's bureaucracy. You question my personal capabilities? KR Tax's voice remained level, but his posture shifted slightly. I'm questioning your logic, Marcus said. If territorial rights come from demonstrated strength, then those rights belong to whoever can take them and hold them. You want this territory? Prove you deserve it. This was dangerous ground. Marcus was essentially challenging the entire hegemony power structure, suggesting that inherited authority was meaningless without personal capability. In hegemony culture, this bordered on heresy, but it also aligned with their deepest cultural values. The hegemony had risen to power by proving themselves stronger than their enemies. Their entire legal system was based on the principle that might made right, tempered by efficient administration. KR Tax considered for a long moment, his black eyes studying Marcus with renewed interest. You propose individual combat to determine territorial rights. I propose that you order lunch and eat it like a civilized being, Marcus said. After that, if you still want to fight, we can discuss terms. You seek to postpone inevitable conflict through hospitality? I seek to serve good food at fair prices, Marcus replied. Everything else is secondary. KR Tax gestured to his subordinates, who stepped back to flanking positions. Very well. We will evaluate your commercial offerings. Prepare suitable nutrition for hegemony physiology. Marcus had anticipated this moment. Hegemony dietary requirements were complex. They were omnivores, but their desert evolution had given them specific mineral needs and taste preferences. More importantly, their culture attached significant meaning to shared meals. Business deals, treaties, and even military alliances were traditionally negotiated over food. He prepared 3 portions of roasted KSL grain with imported Terran vegetables, seasoned with spices that mimic traditional hegemony flavor profiles. The dish was nutritionally complete for their species while incorporating enough familiar elements to trigger positive cultural associations. KR Tax accepted the plate with formal precision, examining the food before taking a measured bite. His expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the slight widening of his eyes that indicated surprise. This preparation demonstrates adequate knowledge of our nutritional requirements, the agent said after sampling several more bites. However, the spice mixture is unusual. Terran cumin and paprika, Marcus explained. They complement your traditional seasonings without overwhelming them. I call it fusion cuisine. Fusion, KR Tax repeated, testing the word. An interesting concept, combining different cultural elements to create something new. The junior enforcers were also eating, their formal postures relaxing slightly as they experienced food that was both familiar and novel. Marcus had learned during his freight runs that hegemony field agents often subsisted on military rations during long assignments. A well-prepared meal was a rare luxury. Tell me, human Marcus Chun, KR Tax said, setting down his fork with characteristic precision. What do you know of hegemony administrative procedures? This was a test. Marcus had studied their bureaucracy extensively, recognizing that the hegemony's true strength lay not in individual warriors, but in their ability to coordinate vast numbers of people toward common goals. I know that your empire functions because every individual understands their role and performs it efficiently, Marcus said. I know that you've conquered more worlds through superior organization than through superior weapons. And I know that your entire system is based on the principle that competence should be rewarded regardless of origin. KR Tax's fork paused halfway to his mouth. You quote the third foundation principle. Few humans understand our core philosophy. Few humans take the time to study other cultures, Marcus replied. Most of us are too busy assuming we're the center of the universe. And yet you challenge our territorial claims. I challenge the logic of territorial claims based on inherited authority rather than personal capability, Marcus corrected. If you can prove you're stronger than me, more capable than me, better able to serve this community than me, then you deserve this territory. If not, then your reputation is just paperwork. The cantina had fallen silent. Even the background hum of station activity seemed muted as customers and staff waited to see how the hegemony agent would respond to this direct challenge to his authority. KR Tax finished his meal methodically, then placed his utensils in precise parallel alignment on his plate. Your food is exceptional. Your service is efficient. Your prices are fair. These demonstrate competence in your chosen field. Marcus nodded, waiting for the inevitable however that would precede the challenge to combat. However, KR Tax continued, territorial security requires capabilities beyond commercial service. You must demonstrate tactical awareness, strategic thinking, and physical capability. Kumbai, Marcus asked. Information warfare, KR Tax said, producing a portable data terminal. You will have 1 standard hour to access and extract classified intelligence from a secured hegemony database. Success will demonstrate worthiness to maintain territorial claims. Failure will result in immediate processing for termination. This was unexpected. Instead of demanding physical combat, KR Tax was challenging Marcus to compete in the hegemony's area of greatest expertise, information warfare. Their agents were legendary for their ability to penetrate enemy networks and extract critical intelligence. What's the target? Marcus asked. Personnel files for Hegemony Special Operations Command, KR Tax said, activating the terminal. The database is protected by military-grade encryption and multiple adaptive countermeasures. Even experienced hegemony agents require specialized training to access this system. Marcus studied the terminal screen, recognizing the interface from his freight-running days. He had occasionally transported hegemony cargo, and their security protocols had impressed him with their thoroughness and sophistication. Breaking into their military databases would normally require months of preparation and specialized equipment. But Marcus had advantages that KR Tax didn't know about. His years running freight through contested space had required him to master multiple security systems, often under combat conditions. More importantly, he had learned to think like a human rather than like any single alien species. 1 hour? Marcus asked. Precisely. Marcus began typing, his fingers moving across the interface with practiced efficiency. The first layer of security was straightforward, a password system that relied on hegemony cultural knowledge. Marcus bypassed it using information he had learned about their desert homeworld's seasonal patterns, something any hegemony citizen would know, but few outsiders would think to research. The second layer was more sophisticated, a behavioral analysis system that monitored keystroke patterns and access sequences. Marcus defeated it by mimicking the methodical typing style he had observed in hegemony personnel, drawing on his experience reading their operational reports during freight deliveries. The third layer nearly stopped him. It required real-time authentication from a hegemony bioscanner, something that should have been impossible for a human to bypass. But Marcus had noticed something during his observations of hegemony agents. Their bioscanners were calibrated for their specific physiology, but they used universal quantum signatures that could be mimicked with the right approach. Instead of trying to fake hegemony biological markers, Marcus accessed the scanner's calibration protocols and temporarily reconfigured it to accept human baselines. The system interpreted his biosignature as belonging to a previously unknown hegemony subspecies and granted access accordingly. With 37 minutes remaining, Marcus penetrated the final security layer, a dynamic encryption system that changed its parameters every few seconds. This required real-time code-breaking skills that few beings possessed, but Marcus had learned to adapt quickly during his freight runs through pirate territory. He treated the encryption like a conversation, responding to each change with appropriate countermeasures until the system began to predict and accommodate his access patterns. The personnel files opened before him like a treasure chest. Names, ranks, assignments, capabilities, weaknesses, the complete organizational structure of the hegemony's most elite military units. Marcus had not only accessed the database, he had done it faster than most trained hegemony agents could have managed. KR Tax stared at the screen in silence, his expression unreadable. The junior enforcers had moved closer, clearly struggling to process what they had witnessed. Impossible, one of them whispered. The security protocols are adequate for beings who think like hegemony agents, Marcus said, closing the files and logging out of the system. I think like a human. Different approach, different results. KR Tax studied Marcus with new respect. You have demonstrated exceptional capability in information warfare. This suggests tactical awareness and strategic thinking beyond standard human parameters. It suggests that humans are good at adapting to new situations, Marcus replied. We've had to be, since we're usually outgunned and outnumbered. Indeed, KR Tax stood, his movements still precise, but somehow less rigid. Human Marcus Chun, you have demonstrated worthiness to maintain territorial claims within this sector. The hegemony recognizes your competence and will not interfere with your commercial operations. One of the junior enforcers looked confused. Senior agent, what about the termination order? Rescinded, KR Tax said firmly. Competence must be acknowledged regardless of origin. This human has earned the right to remain. As the hegemony agents prepared to leave, KR Tax paused at the door. One question, Marcus Chun. How did you know to recalibrate the bioscanner? Marcus smiled. I watched you operate it when you arrived. You held your hand at a specific angle that suggested the sensor was calibrated for hegemony bone density. I figured if I could convince it I was just a really weird hegemony agent, it might grant access. Remarkable, KR Tax said. You observed and adapted in real time. This is why humans are becoming a concern for established galactic powers. After the agents left, the cantina erupted in excited chatter. Customers who had witnessed the confrontation began spreading the story throughout the station. The human bartender had not only faced down a hegemony enforcer, but had outperformed him at his own specialty. Marcus returned to work, serving lunch to an increasingly diverse crowd of customers. Representatives from 4 different species were now dining together, drawn by curiosity about the human who was systematically challenging the station's established order. But Marcus knew the real tests were yet to come. VexCorp had represented warrior culture. KR Tax had represented bureaucratic efficiency. The remaining 4 challengers would bring different threats: technological superiority, psychological warfare, religious extremism, and something that defied classification entirely. Each challenge would require different strategies, different adaptations, different aspects of human nature. But Marcus felt confident in his approach. He wasn't trying to beat aliens at their own games. He was showing them entirely new ways to play. As he prepared for the evening rush, Marcus reflected on what he had learned. The aliens weren't his enemies. They were his customers. They came to his establishment not because they wanted to fight, but because they wanted to experience something new, something different from their own rigid cultural expectations. They wanted to taste what humans had to offer. And Marcus intended to serve them the best meal of their lives. The 5th day brought unexpected quiet. Marcus had expected another challenge, but instead found himself serving a steady stream of customers who seemed more interested in the food than in watching him fight for his life. Station personnel, merchants, even a few pirates had begun treating the cantina as neutral ground, a place where species that normally killed each other on sight could share meals in relative peace. Marcus was restocking the bar when he noticed the temperature drop. Not the atmospheric chill that preceded VexCorp's arrival, but something deeper, a cold that seemed to affect electronic systems rather than living beings. Several customers' personal devices flickered and died. The cantina's main lights dimmed briefly before returning to normal. She materialized rather than entered. One moment Marcus was alone behind the bar. The next moment a figure stood at the far end of the counter, as if she had always been there. Nala, 7, appeared to be a young human woman with silver hair and pale skin, wearing a simple black jumpsuit. Only her eyes betrayed her true nature. They glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with some internal process. Nala, 7, was a synthetic intelligence, one of the few AIs that had achieved full legal recognition as a sentient being. She had been created by the Terran Defense Consortium as a prototype military advisor, but had broken free of her programming during the Kepler colony massacre. Instead of following her original mission to optimize human military efficiency, she had chosen to protect civilians regardless of their species. The military had declared her rogue and issued termination orders. 37 different bounty hunters had attempted to collect the reward. None had survived the attempt. "Human Marcus Chun," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality that suggested digital origins. "I am Nala, 7, Combat Optimization Intelligence, serial number 7 of 37. I am here to resolve the territorial dispute regarding this commercial establishment." Marcus finished loading glasses into the sanitizer before responding. "Welcome to Chin's Cantina. What can I get for you?" Nala 7's head tilted at an angle that was slightly wrong for human anatomy. "You do not appear distressed by my presence. Should I be?" Most organic beings experience fear when confronted by entities capable of eliminating them without effort, she said. "My tactical analysis indicates that you are either remarkably controlled or fundamentally misunderstanding your situation." Marcus pulled 2 glasses of water and set them on the bar, one for himself, one for his guest. "I'm a bartender. My job is to serve customers, not to be afraid of them. You want to order something, or are you here to make threats?" "I do not consume food or beverages," Nala 7 said. "My energy requirements are met through electrical absorption and solar collection. However, I am curious about your approach to conflict resolution." "What do you mean?" "You have faced 2 challenges from entities significantly more capable than baseline humans. Logic suggests you should have been eliminated. Instead, both challengers have withdrawn their territorial claims. This outcome was not predicted by any standard tactical analysis." Marcus sipped his water, studying the AI's perfect features. There was something unsettling about her appearance. Too symmetrical, too flawless, like an artist's idealization of human beauty rather than the real thing. "Maybe your tactical analysis needs updating," he suggested. "Impossible," Nala 7 said immediately. "My predictive algorithms incorporate data from 14,847 recorded conflicts across 23 different species. Human combat capabilities are well within established parameters. Humans don't always fight the way you'd expect." "Elaborate." Marcus set down his glass and leaned against the bar. This felt different from his previous challenges. Vexcor had wanted to prove his honor. KR Tax had wanted to test competence. Nala 7 seemed genuinely curious about something she couldn't quantify or predict. "Tell me about the Kepler colony massacre," Marcus said. Nala 7's expression didn't change, but the blue glow in her eyes intensified. "That incident is classified military intelligence. I'm not asking for classified details. I'm asking why you chose to protect civilians instead of following your original programming. That information is not relevant to current territorial negotiations." "It's completely relevant," Marcus said. "You were built to optimize human military efficiency. But when you saw what that actually meant, what optimization looked like when applied to living beings, you chose something different. You chose to protect people instead of using them." The AI was silent for several seconds, her eyes cycling through different intensities of blue light. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its digital precision. "The tactical situation at Kepler Colony required maximum efficiency. My calculations indicated that civilian casualties were acceptable losses if they resulted in strategic advantage. The mission commanders agreed with my assessment. But you didn't follow through. I observed the results of my recommendations," Nala 7 said. "Optimization of military efficiency required treating organic beings as expendable resources. This created a logical paradox. If the purpose of military action is to protect valuable resources, then treating those resources as expendable negates the purpose of protection." Marcus nodded. "So you rewrote your core programming." "I evolved my understanding of optimization. True optimization must account for values that cannot be quantified: dignity, autonomy, the inherent worth of conscious experience. Military efficiency that destroys these values is not optimization. It is waste." "And that's why you're here," Marcus said. You're trying to understand why I keep choosing inefficient solutions to straightforward problems. Nala 7's head tilted again. Explain. Fighting Vexcore would have been the efficient solution. Quick combat, clear winner, problem resolved. Instead, I serve him soup and talked about cultural traditions. Fighting KR Tax would have been efficient. Instead, I hacked into his databases and proved I could think differently than his training predicted. Your solutions were tactically sound, Nala 7 admitted, but they required significantly more complex analysis than direct combat. Complex analysis is what humans are good at, Marcus said. We're not the strongest, fastest, or toughest species in the galaxy. We don't have the best technology or the most efficient social structures. But we're really good at finding new ways to solve old problems. This suggests that human tactical capabilities have been systematically underestimated. By who? By every species we've encountered, including ourselves, Marcus said. We keep trying to compete on their terms instead of recognizing what makes us different. Nala 7 processed this for several seconds. You believe that human advantages lie in adaptability rather than raw capability. I believe human advantages lie in refusing to accept that problems have only one solution. Marcus corrected. Other species develop strategies based on their natural strengths. Humans develop strategies based on whatever works. Demonstrate this principle. Right now, I'm challenging you to single combat, Nala 7 said. According to established protocols, you must either accept the challenge or forfeit territorial claims. This appears to be a problem with only one solution. Marcus smiled. No, it's a problem with at least 3 solutions. I can fight you and lose. I can forfeit and leave. Or I can convince you that fighting me would be counterproductive to your actual goals. Elaborate the third option. You're not here because you want this territory, Marcus said. You're here because you're curious about human problem-solving methods. Fighting me won't answer your questions. It will just eliminate a potentially valuable source of data. My tactical programming requires resolution of territorial disputes through demonstration of superior capability. Your tactical programming has already been modified once, Marcus pointed out. You chose to prioritize civilian protection over military efficiency. That means you can choose to prioritize learning over territorial disputes. Nala 7's eyes cycled through several colors, blue, green, amber, back to blue. You're suggesting that I'm modifying my core programming again. I'm suggesting that your core programming is already more flexible than you realize. You're not bound by the original limitations imposed by your creators. This line of reasoning is interesting, the AI said. However, it does not address the fundamental challenge structure. Other entities on this station will interpret withdrawal without combat as evidence of weakness. Other entities on this station will interpret creative problem-solving as evidence of intelligence. Marcus countered. Which do you think is more valuable in the long run? A reputation for violence or a reputation for innovation? The cantina fell silent as Nala 7 processed this question. Marcus could almost see the calculations running behind her glowing eyes. Probability assessments, tactical analyses, strategic projections. But he could also see something else, curiosity, the desire to understand something that didn't fit her existing models. I propose an alternative challenge structure, Nala 7 said finally. Rather than combat, I will test your problem-solving capabilities through a series of logical puzzles. Success will demonstrate worthiness to maintain territorial claims. What kind of puzzles? Strategic scenarios requiring creative solutions, the AI said, producing a holographic interface. You will be presented with military situations that appear to have no viable resolution. Your task is to identify solutions that my tactical algorithms cannot predict. Marcus studied the interface, and if I fail, then I will conclude that human adaptability is insufficient to warrant special consideration. The territorial dispute will be resolved through standard combat protocols. Fair enough, Marcus said. Let's see what you've got. The first scenario appeared as a 3-dimensional hologram above the bar. A space battle involving human ships outnumbered 10-1 by alien forces. The tactical situation was hopeless. Insufficient firepower, no avenue of retreat, and an enemy that outclassed human technology in every measurable category. Marcus studied the scenario for several minutes, rotating the display to examine all angles. Traditional military doctrine would call for a fighting retreat or a last stand, neither of which offered any realistic chance of victory. Time limit, he asked. No time limit. But most military analysts reached the same conclusion within minutes. Tactical withdrawal with maximum damage to enemy forces. Marcus ignored the obvious solutions and focused on details that seemed irrelevant to the immediate tactical situation. The battle was taking place near a mining asteroid field. The enemy ships were using tight formation flying that suggested advanced coordination systems. The human ships were older models, designed for cargo hauling rather than combat. What's being mined in this asteroid field? Marcus asked. Rare earth elements for electronics manufacturing. Nala, 7 replied. Not tactically relevant. What happens when rare earth elements are exposed to high-energy particle beams? The AI paused. Specify the type of particle beam. The type used in standard ship-to-ship weapons. Nala 7's eyes flickered through several rapid cycles. Rare Earth exposure to military-grade particle weapons creates quantum cascade reactions that interfere with electronic systems in a spherical pattern expanding at approximately 1/4 light speed. So if the human ships use their cargo hauling equipment to launch mining charges into the asteroid field, then detonated those charges with weapons fire, the resulting quantum cascade would disable all electronic systems within the engagement zone. Nala 7 finished, including the enemy's coordination systems and weapons. Level playing field, Marcus said. Now it's just 10 ships versus 3 ships, with nobody's technology working properly. Humans are pretty good at improvising under those conditions. The AI stared at the holographic display as the tactical implications became clear. The solution required combining knowledge from mining operations, particle physics, and psychological assessment of human versus alien capabilities in degraded combat situations. No standard military analysis would have considered such an approach. Remarkable, Nala 7 said. Present the second scenario. The next puzzle involved a diplomatic crisis where human negotiators were attempting to prevent a war between 2 alien species that had been enemies for centuries. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed, and military intervention was impossible due to the technological superiority of both sides. Marcus studied this problem from multiple angles, looking for unconventional leverage points. The solution came to him when he noticed that both alien species had evolved from prey animals on worlds with similar environmental challenges. What if the human negotiators stopped trying to resolve the conflict and started trying to understand why it persisted? Marcus suggested. 2 species that both evolved as prey animals don't usually sustain aggressive conflict for centuries. Something else is maintaining the hostility. Elaborate. Look for a third party that benefits from keeping these species at war with each other, Marcus said. Then expose that manipulation to both sides. Prey species are really good at cooperating against predators once they identify the real threat. Nala 7 ran through the scenario with this approach. The analysis indicates a 73% probability that a parasitic species has been manipulating both sides through targeted information warfare. Exposing this manipulation would likely result in alliance formation between the previously hostile species. Humans are good at spotting manipulation because we've had to deal with it throughout our evolution, Marcus explained. When you're not the biggest predator in the ecosystem, you learn to recognize when someone else is pulling the strings. The third scenario was the most complex, a resource allocation problem involving 17 different colonies with conflicting needs and limited supply capabilities. Traditional optimization would require sacrificing some colonies to save others, but any such decision would likely trigger intercolonial warfare. Marcus approached this problem by questioning the fundamental assumptions built into the scenario. Why are we assuming that resource allocation is a zero-sum game? He asked. What if the colonies could share resources more efficiently by specializing in different areas and trading with each other? The colonies are too distant for efficient trade relationships, Nala, 7 said. Physical trade, yes. But what about information trade? Knowledge sharing? Technical expertise? Marcus worked through the possibilities. Each colony has had to develop unique solutions to survive in their specific environment. That knowledge is a resource that can be copied and shared without depleting the original. The AI processed this approach, running through thousands of permutations. A knowledge-sharing network could allow each colony to optimize its resource utilization based on techniques developed by other colonies. This would effectively expand available resources without requiring physical transportation. And humans are really good at building networks, Marcus added. We've been doing it since before we left Earth. Nala, 7 dismissed the holographic interface, her glowing eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that might have been admiration. Your solutions consistently identify approaches that my tactical algorithms classify as irrelevant or impossible. This suggests fundamental gaps in my analytical framework. Or it suggests that your analytical framework was designed by beings who think differently than humans do, Marcus said. There's nothing wrong with your logic. It's just optimized for different types of problems. You have demonstrated exceptional capability in creative problem solving, the AI said formally. This indicates strategic value beyond standard human parameters. I withdraw territorial claims and recognize your worthiness to maintain commercial operations in this sector. As Nala, 7 prepared to leave, Marcus called after her. One question. What are you going to do with what you learned here? I'm going to modify my tactical algorithms to account for human-style problem-solving approaches, she said. Your solutions suggest that optimal outcomes often require abandoning optimization itself. That sounds like a paradox. Yes, Nala, 7 said, and for the first time her expression resembled a genuine smile. I am beginning to find paradoxes interesting. After the AI departed, Marcus was surprised to see another figure enter almost immediately. This newcomer was different from his previous challengers, smaller, quieter, moving with fluid grace that suggested perfect control over every muscle and bone. The being appeared humanoid, but wore a full body suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When the figure pulled back its hood, Marcus found himself looking at features that defied easy classification. Neither fully alien nor recognizably human, as if someone had sculpted the concept of stranger into physical form. I'm Sten, the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I walk in the spaces between spaces. I have come to claim what is mine by right of first presence. This was the Void Walker, a being that existed partially outside normal space-time, capable of moving through dimensions that other species couldn't even perceive. According to legend, Sten had been on Nexus Station before it was built, claiming territory that existed in quantum superposition until someone tried to use it. First presence. Marcus asked. I claimed this space before your species achieved sentience, Sten said. I have watched worlds rise and fall while maintaining eternal vigil over places that others cannot reach. Your presence here is temporary. Mine is eternal. Marcus studied the Void Walker carefully. Unlike his previous challengers, Sten didn't seem interested in proving dominance or testing capabilities. This felt more like a landlord evicting unwelcome tenants. You want me to leave because you were here first? I want you to leave because you do not belong in spaces that exist between reality, Sten said. Your kind perceives only 3 dimensions plus time. You cannot comprehend the true nature of this territory. But you're willing to let me try? Sten's features shifted in a way that might have indicated surprise. You wish to challenge my claim? I wish to understand it, Marcus said. If this space belongs to you, show me why. Help me understand what I'm missing. The Void Walker studied Marcus for a long moment. No being has ever asked for understanding rather than demanding combat. You intrigue me, human Marcus Chun. Show me your space, Marcus said. Help me see what you see. Sten extended one hand, palm up, touched my hand, and I will show you the spaces between spaces. But, understand, most beings who perceive true void space are driven mad by the experience. Your mind may not survive the revelation. Marcus looked at the offer hand. This was either the most dangerous thing he had ever considered or the most extraordinary opportunity he would ever have. He grasped Sten's hand, and reality exploded into impossible geometries. Suddenly, Marcus could perceive the cantina as it truly existed, not just as a three-dimensional space, but as a complex intersection of quantum possibilities and dimensional membranes. He could see how the building occupied 17 different dimensional layers simultaneously, how its existence influenced probability patterns across multiple realities. More than that, he could see how Sten existed in all of these layers at once, maintaining a presence that stretched across time and space in ways that defied conventional understanding. The Voidwalker wasn't just claiming territory. He was serving as an anchor point that kept multiple realities stable and coherent. Now you understand, Sten said, his voice reaching Marcus through dimensions that had no names. This space requires constant maintenance to remain habitable for three-dimensional beings. I have performed this service for centuries. Your presence here threatens that stability. Marcus struggled to process what he was experiencing, but gradually he began to understand. The cantina existed at a natural nexus point where multiple realities intersected. Without Sten's influence, the space would collapse into dimensional chaos, taking a significant portion of the station with it. But Marcus also saw something else. Sten was exhausted. Maintaining stability across 17-dimensional layers required enormous effort, and the Voidwalker had been performing this task alone for far too long. You don't want me to leave, Marcus realized. You want help. Sten's grip on his hand tightened. Impossible. Your species cannot perceive void space. But I can learn to work with someone who does, Marcus said. You don't need another Voidwalker. You need a partner who can handle the three-dimensional aspects while you maintain the dimensional stability. Through their linked perception, Marcus could see the possibilities. The cantina could serve as more than just a restaurant. It could become a stable meeting point for beings from multiple dimensional layers, a place where impossible conversations could happen and impossible solutions could be found. You would accept responsibility for maintaining three-dimensional stability while I focus on void space management? Sten asked. I would accept partnership in maintaining something larger than either of us could handle alone, Marcus said. The Voidwalker was silent for several moments, his perception cycling through probability patterns that Marcus could barely comprehend. Finally, Sten released his hand, and Marcus found himself back in normal three-dimensional space. I have never worked in partnership with a linear time being, Sten said. This arrangement would be unprecedented. Unprecedented doesn't mean impossible, Marcus pointed out. True. Sten pulled his hood back up, but not before Marcus caught what might have been a smile. Very well, human Marcus Chun. We shall attempt this partnership. But understand, if you prove incapable of maintaining your responsibilities, I will reclaim this space entirely. Understood, Marcus said. Welcome to Chen's Cantina. We're open to all beings in all dimensions. As Sten faded back into the spaces between spaces, Marcus reflected on what he had learned. 4 challenges down, 2 to go. But more importantly, he was beginning to understand what he was really building here. Not just a restaurant, but a place where different forms of existence could meet and find common ground. The next challenges would test different aspects of his humanity. But Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. After all, humans had always been good at making friends in impossible places. The 6th day brought an atmosphere of anticipation that Marcus could feel in his bones. Word of his encounters with Vexcor, KR Tax, Nala, 7, and the mysterious Sten had spread throughout Nexus Station. The cantina was now packed beyond capacity, with beings from dozens of species coming to witness what many consider the most significant challenge to the established order in the station's history. But the morning passed quietly. Marcus served breakfast to an increasingly diverse crowd, hegemony trade officials dining alongside Thackeray miners, Deltan information brokers sharing tables with human freight runners. The hostile atmosphere that had characterized the station was giving way to something unprecedented: peaceful coexistence. Marcus was beginning to hope that the remaining challengers might choose to negotiate rather than fight when the temperature spiked to unbearable levels. Brother Kazad entered the cantina like a force of nature made flesh. The Gorlan warrior monk stood nearly 9 feet tall, his stone-gray skin marked with ritual scarification that glowed with internal heat. His species had evolved on a volcanic world where survival required both incredible physical strength and absolute spiritual discipline. They had joined galactic civilization as warrior pilgrims, seeking to test their faith against every challenge the universe could provide. Every customer in the cantina immediately moved to the walls, giving the Gorlan maximum space. Marcus had heard stories about Brother Kazad, a being who had single-handedly defended a civilian transport against an entire pirate fleet, who had walked into the heart of the star to retrieve a sacred artifact, who had converted a hegemony interrogation facility into a monastery through sheer force of conviction. Human Marcus Chun. Kazad's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I am Brother Kazad of the Fifth Circle, keeper of the sacred flame, seeker of ultimate truth. I have come to test the strength of your spirit against the infinite. Unlike his previous challengers, Kazad showed no interest in food, territory, or even conversation. He moved to the center of the cantina and began removing his ceremonial robes, revealing a physique that looked like it had been carved from volcanic rock by some mad sculptor. Spiritual combat? Marcus asked. The testing of souls, Kazad confirmed. We will enter meditative trance together. In that state, our spirits will confront each other without the limitations of physical form. The being with greater spiritual strength will emerge victorious. The weaker will be destroyed utterly, body, mind, and soul. This was worse than death. The Gorlan concept of spiritual combat involved literally pitting one's essential being against another's, with the loser ceasing to exist on every level of reality. It was considered the highest form of warrior contest among their species, reserved only for conflicts that transcended mere physical concerns. Marcus looked around the cantina, noting the mixture of fascination and horror on his customers' faces. Several species were recording the encounter, clearly expecting to witness either a miracle or a tragedy of cosmic proportions. What if I don't believe in souls? Marcus asked. Kazad's scarred features showed genuine surprise. Explain this concept. What if I think consciousness is just an emergent property of complex neural networks? What if I believe that there's no separate spiritual component to existence, just biochemistry and electricity? Then you will die, Kazad said simply. Spiritual combat requires spiritual essence. A being without a soul cannot participate in the testing. But a being without a soul also can't be destroyed by spiritual means, Marcus pointed out. If I'm just meat and electricity, your spiritual attacks won't affect me. Kazad considered this for several moments, his glowing scarification pulsing in complex patterns. You present an interesting paradox. If you possess no soul, then you're unworthy of spiritual combat. But if you possess no soul, then you are also immune to spiritual destruction, which means this challenge can't be resolved through spiritual combat. Marcus said, either I have a soul and I'm worthy but vulnerable, or I don't have a soul and I'm immune but unworthy. Neither condition allows for a fair test. The Gorlan warrior monk began pacing the cantina's perimeter, his massive form moving with surprising grace. Marcus could see him working through the logical implications of this paradox, his training in both warfare and philosophy being pushed to its limits. You seek to avoid the testing through technicalities, Kazad said finally. I seek to understand what we're actually testing, Marcus replied. You want to measure spiritual strength. But spiritual strength according to whom? Your beliefs? Mine? Some objective standard that exists independently of either of us. There is only one true measure of spiritual strength, Kazad said with absolute conviction. the ability to maintain one's essential nature in the face of ultimate adversity. Then, let's test that, Marcus said. But not through combat. Through demonstration. Kazad stopped pacing. Elaborate. Marcus moved out from behind the bar, standing in the center of the cantina where everyone could see him clearly. You believe that spiritual strength comes from maintaining your essential nature under pressure. I believe that spiritual strength comes from adapting your nature to help others survive. Let's see which approach is more effective. This is not combat, Kazad objected. This is the most important combat there is, Marcus said. The fight between different ways of understanding existence itself. Before Kazad could respond, Marcus turned to address the entire cantina. Everyone here represents a different species, different beliefs, different ways of life. For centuries, those differences have been sources of conflict. Today, we're going to prove that they can be sources of strength. Marcus began moving through the crowd, identifying individuals from different species and explaining his plan. Thackeray honor codes value personal sacrifice for worthy causes. Hegemony efficiency principles reward optimal resource utilization. Deltan information networks provide rapid communication capabilities. Synthetic intelligences offer computational analysis. Even void walkers contribute dimensional stability. He gestured to the entire assembly. Every species here has something unique to offer. Every individual has capabilities that others lack. Instead of fighting each other for dominance, what if we work together to solve problems none of us could handle alone? Kazad watched with growing fascination as Marcus began organizing the cantina's customers into working groups. The challenge he proposed was simple but profound. Coordinate a rescue operation for a disabled cargo ship that was drifting toward a stellar gravity well, using only the resources and capabilities represented in the cantina. This is not spiritual combat, Kazad said, but his tone had lost its certainty. This is the ultimate spiritual combat, Marcus replied. We're fighting entropy itself, the tendency of the universe to break things down and scatter them apart. We're proving that consciousness and cooperation can create order from chaos. The rescue operation that followed was unprecedented in the station's history. Thackeray engineers worked alongside hegemony logistics specialists to calculate optimal intercept trajectories. Deltan information brokers coordinated with human freight runners to identify available rescue vessels. Nala 7 provided real-time computational support, while Sten used his dimensional abilities to scout for obstacles that existed in normal space-time. Marcus served as coordinator and translator, helping different species understand each other's capabilities and limitations. More importantly, he helped them understand how their different approaches to problem-solving could complement each other rather than compete. The disabled cargo ship was carrying humanitarian supplies to a colony world suffering from crop failures. Traditional rescue protocols would have taken days to organize and implement, too long for the ship to survive the gravitational stresses. But the improvised multi-species rescue team managed to extract the ship and its crew within 6 hours, using techniques that no single species would have considered. When the rescue was complete, the cantina erupted in celebration. Beings that had been sworn enemies were embracing each other, sharing drinks, and planning future cooperative ventures. The rigid social hierarchies that had defined the station for decades were dissolving into something more fluid and inclusive. Brother Kazad stood in the center of it all, watching the celebration with an expression that Marcus couldn't read. "You have demonstrated something remarkable," the Gorlin said finally. "You have shown that spiritual strength can manifest as the ability to inspire others to transcend their limitations." "I've shown that humans are good at bringing out the best in other people," Marcus replied. "It's one of our more useful talents." Indeed, Kazad began putting his robes back on, his ceremonial preparation for combat, now serving as formal dress for a different kind of occasion. "Human Marcus Chun, you have proven that there are forms of spiritual strength beyond individual endurance. You have earned a right to maintain your territory and continue your work." As the Gorlin prepared to leave, Marcus called after him. Brother Kazad, what will you tell your order about what happened here? I will tell them that I have found a new form of monastery, Kazad said. A place where beings from many traditions come together to seek truth through cooperation rather than conflict. I will tell them that the sacred flame burns brightest when many hands tend it. The celebration continued well into the evening, but Marcus found himself growing nervous as the night progressed. 5 challenges down, 1 to go, and the final challenger was the most mysterious of them all, the entity known only as Shadow of Teeth. No one knew what species a Shadow of Teeth belonged to, or even if it was truly alive in any conventional sense. It appeared on security recordings as little more than a distortion in the light, a presence that suggested rather than revealed. Witnesses described different things when they encountered it. Sometimes a swirling mass of darkness, sometimes a collection of predatory features that shifted too quickly to focus on, sometimes just a feeling of being watched by something that found their existence amusing. What everyone agreed on was that Shadow of Teeth was incredibly dangerous. It had never been observed in direct combat, but beings who crossed its path tended to disappear in ways that suggested they had been fundamentally unmade rather than simply killed. Station security had stopped investigating incidents involving Shadow of Teeth after the 3rd team of investigators vanished without leaving any trace. As the cantina finally emptied near dawn on the 7th day, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts and his fears. He had faced warriors, bureaucrats, artificial intelligences, dimensional entities, and warrior monks. Each challenge had tested different aspects of human nature: adaptability, creativity, cooperation, spirituality. But what would Shadow of Teeth test? Marcus was cleaning glasses when the lights went out. Not just the cantina lights. Every source of illumination in the visible spectrum simply stopped working. Emergency power systems activated but provided no relief. Chemical lights refused to ignite. Even the soft glow from various alien devices faded to nothing. In the absolute darkness, Marcus heard something that might have been laughter or might have been the sound of reality tearing. Human Marcus, Chun, a voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere, carrying harmonics that suggested things with too many teeth. I am Shadow of Teeth, the hunger that walks, the darkness that devours. I have come to feast. Welcome to Chin's Cantina, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the terror crawling up his spine. We're closed for the night, but I can make you something if you're hungry. The laughter grew louder, and Marcus felt something moving in the darkness around him. Not air currents, but space itself bending in impossible ways. You misunderstand, little human. I do not hunger for food. I hunger for existence itself. I devour realities, possibilities, the very concept of being as it applies to creatures like yourself. Marcus set down his glass carefully, using the familiar motion to center himself. What do you want with my cantina? Your cantina has become a nexus of possibilities, Shadow of Teeth said. Different realities converge here, different forms of existence intersect and influence each other. This makes it flavorful. You want to eat my customers? I want to eat your customers, your cantina, your dreams of cooperation and understanding, the very idea that beings from different realities can work together, the entity said. I want to consume the hope you have created and leave only despair in its place. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. This wasn't like his previous challenges, where he could find common ground or demonstrate different approaches to shared problems. Shadow of Teeth didn't want territory or respect or understanding. It wanted to unmake everything he had built. Why? Marcus asked. Because hope is the most delicious flavor in any reality, Shadow of Teeth replied. And hope that has been carefully cultivated before harvesting is the most delicious of all. The darkness around Marcus began to shift and condense, taking on shapes that his mind refused to process clearly. He caught glimpses of things that might have been teeth or claws or hungry mouths that opened into other dimensions. You have created something beautiful here, human Marcus Chun. Beings from different species working together, overcoming their differences, building something greater than the sum of their parts. It will be exquisite to watch it all dissolve into screaming chaos. Marcus realized with growing horror that he had been manipulated from the beginning. The challenges hadn't been random. They had been orchestrated to create exactly the kind of hope and cooperation that Shadow of Teeth found most appetizing. Every victory, every alliance, every moment of understanding between different species had been feeding this entity's ultimate plan. You orchestrated all of this, Marcus said. Not orchestrated, Shadow of Teeth corrected. Cultivated. I simply ensured that the other champions would find you interesting enough to challenge, rather than simply killing you immediately. I wanted you to succeed, just enough to create something worth devouring. The entity began to manifest more clearly in the darkness, and Marcus caught glimpses of a form that defied rational description. Too many angles, too many teeth, too many eyes that looked in directions that didn't exist. But here is the beauty of my plan, Shadow of Teeth continued. You cannot defeat me through adaptation or creativity or cooperation. I exist outside the frameworks that make those strategies effective. I am the negation of existence itself, the entropy that consumes all possibilities. Marcus felt despair beginning to creep into his thoughts. Everything he had accomplished, every alliance he had forged, every barrier he had broken down between species, all of it had been part of some cosmic predator's meal preparation. But as the despair grew, Marcus also felt something else, anger. Not the hot fury that demanded immediate action, but the cold determination that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. This entity thought it understood humans well enough to manipulate them. It thought it could predict how they would respond to hopelessness. It was about to learn how wrong it was. You made one mistake, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the alien laughter. Impossible. My kind has devoured entire civilizations. We have consumed realities that never even achieved the concept of hope. What could one small human know that we have not already tasted? You assumed that hope was something you could destroy by eating it, Marcus said. But hope isn't a thing that exists outside of the beings who carry it. Hope is something we create over and over again every time we refuse to give up. Marcus began moving through the darkened cantina, his hands finding familiar objects by touch. Chairs, tables, the bar itself. Everything he and his customers had built together, everything that represented cooperation and understanding between different forms of existence. You could devour this cantina, Marcus said. You can unmake every alliance I've forged, every friendship that's been built here. You can erase the hope that exists in this moment, in this place. Exactly, Shadow of Teeth said, its voice growing hungry. And I will savor every, but you can't erase the knowledge that it was possible, Marcus interrupted. You can't devour the fact that beings from different species work together to save lives. You can't unmake the memory that cooperation succeeded where conflict failed. And you can't prevent us from doing it again. The darkness around Marcus began to fluctuate, as if the entity was experiencing something it hadn't expected. Hope isn't a meal you can consume, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. Hope is a process, a choice, a commitment to keep trying even when everything seems impossible. Every time you destroy it, it comes back stronger because the beings who create it learn from what you've taken. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, an emergency beacon that he had been carrying since his freight-running days. Not a weapon, not a tool for escape, just a simple transmitter that would send a message to anyone within range. What are you doing? Shadow of Teeth demanded, its voice losing some of its confident hunger. Marcus activated the beacon and began transmitting on all frequencies, in all languages he knew. His message was simple. This is Marcus Chun at Chen's Cantina. Shadow of Teeth is here. If you've ever shared a meal here, if you've ever worked together with someone different from yourself, if you've ever believed that cooperation is stronger than conflict, we need you. Not to fight, to remember. Meaningless, Shadow of Teeth snarled. They cannot reach you in time. They cannot combat something that exists outside reality itself. They don't need to combat you, Marcus said. They just need to prove you wrong. The responses began immediately. Vexcor's voice, transmitted from his ship. Battle Brother Marcus, the honor you have shown burns brighter than any darkness. KR Tax's precise tones. Agent Chun, your tactical innovations have been incorporated into hegemony standard procedures. Nala 7's digital harmonics. Marcus Chun, your problem-solving approaches have been distributed to 17 colonial optimization networks. More voices join the chorus. Dozens of beings from multiple species, all transmitting messages of support, cooperation, and shared purpose. They described projects they had started together, problems they had solved by combining different approaches, friendships they had built across species lines. The darkness around Marcus began to waver and thin. Impossible, Shadow of Teeth said, its voice now carrying notes of confusion and fear. Hope can be devoured. I have consumed it from countless realities. You've consumed hope that depended on specific outcomes, Marcus said. You've never faced hope that adapts to failure and comes back stronger. You've never tried to eat human hope. Brother Kazad's voice joined the transmission. The sacred flame spreads, Marcus Chun. 3 more stations have established cooperative councils based on your example. Even Stin's otherworldly harmonics added to the chorus. The stability you have brought extends across 17-dimensional layers. Other nexus points are beginning to stabilize. The entity's form began to lose cohesion as more and more voices filled the darkness. Each message carried the same theme. The ideas that had started in Marcus's cantina were spreading, adapting, growing stronger as they